Hello everyone, welcome to Singapore Geospatial Week Plus 2020, an event organized by GeoWorks, Singapore's Land Authority's Geospatial Industry Centre. We are pleased to bring to you 2 weeks full of geospatial webinars spanning various industry tracks and international speakers. Today, we're excited to bring to you the IoT series for IoT applications for smart cities. CK will be your moderator for today, and if you have any questions during the webinar, please leave them in the Q&A chat box and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I will now pass the presentation to CK. CK, please.
Thank you, Hisan, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing from. It's a pleasure to join you all for today's session on IoT applications for smart cities. And quick introduction of IoT SG, as Hisan mentioned, that IoT SG is one of the largest community in the region, and we work closely with GeoWorks as well as and many other such agencies and institutions. When you talk about smart cities, when you talk about smart buildings, geotech plays a very critical role in driving IoT applications. And with me today, we have 3 wonderful speakers as well as friend who I know personally very well. We have Sankar, based out of Hong Kong. He is a regional digital services and products leader, East Asia, Arup. And then with him, we have Vicky. She's also based in Hong Kong. She's a GIS lead for East Asia. And then we have Yukata-san. He's based out of Japan, Chief Officer, Smart Community Department, New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization, NEDO. So what we're going to do for next roughly about 1 hour is we're going to hear first Sankar and Vicky some of the interesting work which Arup is doing around geotechnologies, around solving some problems of smart cities. And then we hear from Yukata-san on some of the standard approach when we talk about applications and designing solutions for smart cities. And then I will take like another 10 minutes to help you understand when you talk about solutions, why cybersecurity is critical, because when we connect all these technologies, humans, and sharing tons and tons of data, right? So cybersecurity is critical in designing IoT and OT applications, and I'm going to touch upon some of those parts. And then we'll keep about 10-15 minutes for the question answer sessions. As Hisan mentioned, that either you can post on the question tab, you don't have to wait for the panel discussion. You can start posting the question right away during any presentations, but we'll try to keep those questions during the panel discussions. Yukata-san on the virtual stage from Japan to share some of his interesting work and the team is doing on how do we standardize, as I mentioned, because we can talk about a lot of IoT use cases. There have to be certain frameworks and certain approach to design solutions, not just from the technology point of view, but from the business point of view also. So let us take Yukata-san to help us explain some of those topics. So over to you, Yukata-san.
Yeah, thank you for introducing me. And my theme is applying ISO IC systems approach to win-win design for smart businesses in cities. My name is Manchu, and I'm responsible for NEDO and Japan Smart Community Alliance, JSCA. Today's topics are like this. Before the main topic, I'd like to introduce briefly about JSCA. The main mission.
Sorry to interrupt, Yukata-san. It's just me who is seeing the video blur, or?
Yeah, me too. The PowerPoint seems blur.
Okay, so maybe Yukata-san, could you press one more time, unshare and share?
Okay.
Yeah, because it's getting blurred, so I thought it's just my side.
How about this?
Let's wait for this to arrive. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. The main missions of JSCA is to assist members in creating their smart businesses in the energy and city fields, which cannot be realized by an individual company, but applying international standards as necessary. The chairman is Hitachi's person. The number of members is 249.
I think I have to interrupt you again. Sorry. I
No?
think the slide is again getting blurred for some reason.
Really?
So, yeah, if you're okay, what I could do, I could play the slide from my side.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So you just have to give me the cue when
Okay.
to press next. Is that okay?
Okay. Okay.
I'm just using the slide which you sent to me
Yes.
a few days back. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes. And the next one.
See the clear? Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And the next one, please. Next, please. Yes. And the secretary of JCA is NEDO. And it is supported by METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. JCA has 3 working groups. And today I'll mention about the International Strategy Working Group. Next, please. And there are several study groups under the International Strategy Working Group. And today, I'd like to mention about use case study groups activity between 2017 and 19. Okay, please. What's a smart city? I think it is a city with smart businesses generated by people, citizens, residents, or communities, or local companies. ISO uses the term smart community, and IEC uses the term smart cities. Regarding the definitions of both books, smart city is almost same as smart community. So today I'll use the word smart city. A definition by NEDO is a new type community with people participation aiming to make a society smarter. Next one. Creating a smart business scenario that people could participate utilizing data rather than getting into a surveillance society, such as the novel 1984. How could we create those smart business scenarios or use cases? The hints are to set goals mitigating common city issues of people. To have more people discussing together about the smart business model with diagrams. Axis for universe of discourse, it is called reference architecture. And description of use cases is very important. It is called, one of the 8 them is mapping on reference architecture. I'll explain to you later. Okay, please. ISO IEC directives has systems approach description with reference architecture and use case. The reference architecture's definition is like this. It is a common understanding for the universe of discourse. Use case definition is like this. Please go ahead. It is an image of win-win interaction among people for the smart business. Okay, please. This is an example of reference architecture for smart cities called Smart City Infrastructure Architecture Model, SCIAM, proposed by Dean DKE of German and discussed in Sensenric ETSI. And it is described in 3 axes that is understandable by people. The Z-axis describes layers, abstraction levels. The top level is called business layer. Next function, information, communication, and component. Y-axis describes zones, control locations, process, field, station, operation, enterprise, and market. X-axis expresses domains, disciplines to be related. Smart cities have a lot of disciplines to be related. It is a feature of smart cities. Smart supply waste management, water, wastewater, mobility, transportation, healthcare, active assisted living, security or civil, and energy, building, and industry. And this right-hand side figure shows the business layer with domain and zone. Thinking use case on this business layer is, is a mapping plane for use cases. Okay, please. How to describe a use case? There are several methods. The official one defined by ISO and IEC is ISO 62559 Part 2, Use Case Methodology, definition of the templates for use cases, actor list, and a requirements list. It contains the figures like this. It is UML figures, but this use case method, description method, is too fine or too complicated. It is a description for IT specifications, please. So it's difficult to understand your business scenario. Okay, please. The next one is a list format. It is a use cases of fireware that is an open platform based on NGSI of ETSI. But clearly, please, it isn't enough for understanding your business scenarios too. Okay, please. The next one is also written in ISO IEC directive, the systems approach, a mapping on the business layer of the reference architecture. This shows an example of smart parking. A car finds an available parking lot. The parking lot is belonging to the domain of building or facility. A city manages parking lot or meters, and the city wants to mitigate congestion in the center of the city and facilitates locate local economies there. And next, and there are a lot of cars passing the parking lot, and some kind of car with camera could sense the parking lot availability. And please, the analyzer of the car could send the information of space availability to a cloud service. This is a mobility and transportation domain. Okay, please. And the cloud service could send the information of space availability to a driver who wants to park his or her car in the center of the city, please. And if he or she could find the place, she will pay for the money, and please. And the city could collect the money, please. And the city could reward to the cloud service, please, for reducing wandering cars, please. And the cloud service could reward the passing car's owner to provide information. The mapped use case like this could be understandable, and it promotes people's discussion to make the your business scenario better. Okay, and JSCA has another approach, a business scenario diagram with value proposition and revenue mechanism. Value network diagram made by VDI, VDGMA, and Platform Industry 4.0 AG6 in Germany, and magic triangles of University of St. Gallen. The left-hand side figure is the same contents as I mentioned in parking, smart parking, but it has value propositions and revenue mechanisms. Cloud service provides information of space to a driver who needs a parking lot, City reduces wandering cars and CO2 emission. Industrial IoT platform manages data of the cloud service. Passing car senses and analyzes if each parking lot is available and send it to the cloud service. About revenue mechanism, cloud service gets reward from the city for reducing wandering cars and CO2 emission, and the passing cars gets the service fee from the cloud service. On the right-hand side, the magic triangle shows which aspect is really innovative for each stakeholder strategies. So this figure, using this figure, please, it makes participants make merits clearer. So JSCA use case study groups, the members studied what reference architecture, use case, and the business scenario diagrams are, like you now, and they created, described, and discussed their smart businesses using business scenario diagram to solve city issues. This figure is an example of this workshop. It is a microgrid in a building. It is called Building Energy Management System, BEMS. BEMS is not a new idea, but it has not been penetrated yet enough for the resilience of the city. Why? Because the initial cost for building facility owner to install rechargeable batteries, PV panels, or inverters are expensive. Using this diagram, a member of this workshop notified that a city could provide the initial cost for the building facility owner. The building facility owner doesn't own the facilities for BEMS, but operate and manage them instead of city. So a city could stabilize power system for resilience in the city. So this kind of diagrams facilitate the people's discussion. It is a very important point for get the real smart cities with people. Okay, so this is my presentation. Shall we create smart business use cases in cities together? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Taka-san. A very interesting presentation. As you were discussing that smart cities is not just about one agency or one technology or one platform, is the integration of many such use cases. I think that's where we do need to have some standard approach to integrate the data from various systems, and more than that, to design the use case and design the workflow. So stay with us. We're going to bring you back again for the panel discussion. And for the audience, now it's my turn to take up the stage and share some of the insight in my conversation with many organizations, whether it's a large company, the startups, the agencies, to touch upon one of the critical topics, which I believe is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity primarily into IoT and OT sector. OT is basically the operational technologies, and as we know, many of the smart city use cases do involve IoT and OT technologies. So allow me to share my screen. Give me a second. Yeah. So I hope you could see my screen. So yeah. So as I mentioned, this is CK Vishwakarma, founder and CEO of AllThingsConnected, and also the founder of IoT SG, which is the largest IoT ecosystem, and the session which is hosted today with partnership of GeoWorks. As I mentioned, I'm going to cover up quickly, like in next 10 minutes, some glimpse of the issues and the challenges of IoT use cases and what they bring in from cybersecurity point of view. Bit of history, as we know, we're talking about IoT and smart cities and digital transformation, all those buzzwords. So back in like 20 years back, there were systems before. It's not something new, as Yukata-san also mentioned, some of the use cases have been there. Last 10 years, a lot of new solution has come in, whether it's into wellness, whether it's into smart metering, a lot of such use cases. So where does the smart cities and IoT comes in picture? Basically, the future connected world is basically when we start connecting them. This is where the real value comes in, right? So a product independently is not much more of a value, but when we start integrating the data from various sources, whether the GIS data integrated with the, let's say, the surveillance data in integration with the emergency and rescue department. So a lot of such system, when they start integrating, and that's the fact of the future, they're going to happen, right? No matter how much you talk about the challenges, but the future is going to be the connected, right? So just take a quick step back, what it takes to build an IoT solution, right? So, and this is like very, very high level view of a typical IoT solution, whichever industry it is. There are devices, there are gateways, there's a connectivity, there's infrastructure, there's application layer, a lot of things goes in. And as you know, there is no one company who can provide everything. There is no one vendor who can do everything. It's pretty much of integrating various technologies, various solutions from multi-vendor, multi-tech, and so on and so forth, right? And just to touching upon quickly about the connectivity, because we hear a lot about 5G every day now, but again, depend on the use case, right? Whether it's a 5G use case, whether it's LPWAN use case, whether it's NFC use case, it really depends on the use, what we're trying to achieve, right? And I can tell you, whichever use case you talk about, there will not be only one communication technology you might be dealing with, right? Similarly, we talk about cloud, we talk about fog, we talk about edge. So there is most of the smart city use cases will involve all of those three layers. So having said that, some of the use cases before we talk about cybersecurity, and it's may not be new for you. A smart city is very broad definition, right? So smart nation Singapore, smart city Hong Kong, smart city Jakarta and Tokyo will be different. But broadly, if you look at the use case point of view, there are so many of them, whether it's about electric vehicles, whether it's about solar panel, whether it's about energy management, transportation, and so on and so forth, right? Some of the examples I picked up from a research page. So take a quick example from the transportation perspective, right? So we talk about ride sharing a lot today, whether it's Uber, Grab of the world. We know vehicle as a moving infrastructure. So many of such companies who are driving this in future of the infotainment, that when you move from one point to other point, you're not just sitting idle as a passenger, but you can interact, you can do a lot of other things. So this is where the 5G and a lot of such technology comes in, right? So similarly, when you talk about, let's say, smart grid or the power energy solution for the entire city, right? So there are multiple solutions out there. There's a wind power, there's a solar, there's a PVs. But as we speak today, if you talk to any energy agency, they'll tell you so much of challenges they have today, from operational challenges, from the losses challenges. Right? This is where the IoT comes in to help them to be more efficient and to be more cost effective. Similarly, talk about surveillance. If you look into, let's say, in Singapore context, so when you're moving from point A to point B, you may be interacting with a lot of such solutions. So instead of just having a CCTV separately and then other systems separately, there are a lot of such integrated approach organizations are taking upon to drive a better experience and also a safe journey for the passengers and the citizens. And lastly, we talk about intelligent transportation system, ITS, right? So this is some of the future world. For example, SKT, this is from SKT, Korea. They're talking about how the future of the transportation will look like. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, we talk about EVs in integrated fashion. So I mean, I can go on and on and on. So there are a lot of use cases in a typical smart city, but let's come to the topic of cybersecurity and IoT and OT, right? And if you, I'm guessing many of you, if not all, are familiar with a website called Shodan, and you can look at it later. So when you look at Shodan and you search for IoT devices, you will see so many of open hackable solutions out there, which might be connected to some critical infrastructure, right? And those IoT devices could be your cameras, could be your AGVs, could be your energy meters, could be your HVAC systems, right? So as we're talking about smart world and smart cities, we also need to look into what challenges it brings in. And you can see some of the recent report, I'm just bringing it up here. The war of the future will not be about sending missiles and guns, right? It will be about hacking the enemy's infrastructure. And imagine if the enemy state has hacked our power systems or microgrids, right? It will impact the complete city in the nation and may disrupt the entire business also. And we can see it happening many more times than before. Industrial systems, healthcare systems. This is one of the most famous attack a few years back, NotPetya, which brings the major loss to the companies like Sankar. The challenge, what as I mentioned, the IoT and smart city solution brings in that the usual IT solutions dealing with the very few protocols and the technologies, right? So IoT is a little bit more when it comes to OT, right? So when I talk about, let's say, transportation system, so it deals with a lot of OT technologies, right? PLC, SCADA, DCS, ICS, a lot of other such protocols which a typical IT solution doesn't deal with, right? And this is where it gets complex, because smart cities, smart nation use cases are integration of IT and OT technologies, and to secure them with multi-protocol, multi-vendor, multi-tech approach is what gets complex. Same when you're looking for a use case point of view, vulnerabilities, right? What kind of vulnerabilities you need to deal with? So just to give you, it's not comprehensive, but just to give you a very high level idea that when you talk about protocol point of view of the vulnerabilities, right? So there's so many of them. Some are simple, like password attack you might be seeing, right? Or man-in-the-middle attack on the backnet protocol, or it could be device layer like buffer overflow or hardcore exploit, or it could be a malware attack. You might be hearing a lot about phishing, right? Or ransomware. So what I'm trying to show here is there are so many different ways your system could be hacked, depending on how it's designed. And as the last and the worst is basically the zero-day attack. So the analogy which I give regularly, given the situation right now, is COVID-19 is a typical zero-day attack in biological world, right? Zero-day attack is typically something which we have not seen before, something we have not dealt before, so we do not know how to react to it. And that's the worst situation to be in. As you can see what COVID-19 has done to the world, same thing as zero-day attack in your smart city solution could be very bad, if you can imagine, right? So having said that, while there are challenges to deal such issues, there are solutions also. So as a company, we also work with companies to help their solutions to be better and secured. So just to give you a very, again, high level, not to go deep dive here. So typical smart city use cases, some of the use cases we can think about, Yukata was sharing, or Vicky and Sankar was sharing. Imagine a use case that's for transportation, right? So there is IT network in a transportation network. Then there is an OT network also. PLC, the SCADA, the field devices, your sensor in the field, your remote control units, and all those kind of things, right? Then there's a demilitarized zone, DMZs, right? So what we do typically, from my experience point of view as a company, what we do, as I mentioned, that each solution is exposed to different kind of attack. So there's no, first of all, there's no one silver bullet here, right? You have to understand your system, you have to understand your use cases, what kind of potential threats it brings in, because if you do not know, you can't address it. So this is where some of the knowledge comes in picture of OT systems and the IT system, that what kind of potential threats your system which you're designing to solve some problems, whether there's a parking solutions or BMS solution, at the same time, how do we analyze it? So what we do today, we understand them, we understand the traffic, what kind of traffic is going in and out, then we analyze it, and then we basically take action based on what kind of threat it brings in. Similarly, but we do it for the OT side of it, right? So like I said, if you see here, different kind of attacks, different kind of vulnerability of OT system. Similar approach we take, that we understand the OT traffic, analyze it, and then do either anomaly, heuristic, or signature-based detections to help organization understand what actions to be taken and mitigate the process, changing policies, isolating devices or solutions, and so on and so forth, right? And when we merge it, that's where the comes in. So I'm just going to take one quick more example here from surveillance, the video management solution, right? So what I'm trying to share here is that as a solutions company, whether you're a solution provider or looking for solution, you don't have to look at threats in silo, right? So VMS is an integrated solution of a camera, of a encoder or a switcher or a software, a lot of other things. So if your solution provider says my camera is secured, or your switch provider says my switch is secured, or software guy says my software is secured, it doesn't help. But you need to look into as end-to-end security, right? Because as you see here, each part of the solution brings different kind of threats. So you need to understand what potential threats as a solution you go to deal with, and then you solve those problems. The where do we trap the network? Where do you analyze the network, and those sorts of things, right? Similarly, let's take one more example of transportation, right? So today's transportation is not about riding bus in silo or riding a train in silo. I picked up this slide from NESA, which is the security agency in Europe. Transportation today deals with and interact with many stakeholders, right? So when you are taking a train, enjoying free Wi-Fi in the train station or in the transportation, you also need to deal with how this is happening, right? So there's a lot of eavesdropping, a lot of data theft potentially may happen, a lot of systems, signaling system can be hacked. So I'm not trying to give a solution here today because there will be another discussion, but just to make you aware of what you need to think when you talk about solution. But broadly from the IoT and OT solutions point of view, if I categorize back to the 4 layers, as I mentioned about the architecture, there are devices. You need to think of how do we secure the devices. You need to think of how do we secure the communication, whether through access control, through the multi-factor authentication, and then how do you secure your data at rest or in transit or the platform, right? And then security is not just about a one-time thing, is a kind of life cycle, right? How do you upgrade and update the patches? How do you manage different vendors out there? How do we raise awareness to the users and the agencies? So cybersecurity is not something you can do once and done with it. It is a continuous journey. And the good part is there are many agencies are working towards it. Some are specific to a specific technology. For example, communication on GSMA or LoRa on the LoRa technologies, obviously. But then there are like agencies like NIST in Europe, US, or NISA in Europe, or CSA in Singapore, who are working towards it. So Singapore, for example, has launched a IoT OT master plan, if some of you are familiar with. So do read about this, be aware of what government agencies and the global initiatives are working on it. Cybersecurity is not something you should be worried and then do nothing, because if you just keep worrying about cybersecurity, you won't even proceed. So as much as it is a challenge, but it should not be looked as a blocker for you to build solution for your smart cities. But you need to be aware of that cybersecurity is not something you will think after the solution is designed and built and deployed. Cybersecurity should be thought from the day one when you start to think about this use case and the business model with your customers and the partners, right? So as I mentioned, the cybersecurity is critical for you to consider in your IoT and OT use cases when you're solving the problems of smart cities, which includes transportation, energy, industry 4.0, manufacturing, healthcare, financial, a lot of such, right? So this is the last cartoon which I want to share here, is that the attack, the enemy might be just guy sitting somewhere behind the computer, right? But you could address it as far as you prepare for it, right? So the good part is, and this is the last slide for me, is some of you might have seen this slide because I do share this regularly. 1928, back in Popular Mechanics, one of the most popular magazine you might be familiar with. This is what the future of city was published, right? How the future of city 90 years back. So we are not talking about smart city today or 10 years back. We have been envisioning smart cities for 100 years, right? The good part is, if you look at the recent Singapore Transportation Agency's view of smart cities, you can see how close it looked like, right? Pretty much almost same. The difference here is one was a vision, second is a reality. And this is where IoT, this is where geotechnology, this is where AI, machine learning, this is where robotics, all these emerging technologies comes in. But again, to conclude, all these technologies are great, but smart cities are built on the people. They got to be secure, they got to be safe. Otherwise, it will just become another museum and showcase somewhere behind the wall. It won't solve the problems of what we're trying to solve. So with that, I would like to end my session, and here is my contact details. So if you have any question for me, you can reach out to me or connect with me on LinkedIn, or just drop me a note on connect@allthingsc.com. And with that, we are going to bring the discussion for the panel, right? So I think we just in the time. So if my panelist could please enable your microphone, and let's get into the open conversation and see if there are any specific questions from the audience. Otherwise, I will ask my own questions. So let's see, there's a question here. I'm looking at the question tab, and so the other speakers can also see. So the first question here is from Kazuyuki Hashimura. He mentioned that I think smart cities include data content and data models, vocabularies and data handlers, APIs and all etc. Do you have any idea on which part of the technical components for the smart cities need to be standardized globally or locally? Maybe I think this would be a good question for Sankar and Vicky to help answering. Would you like to take on Vicky and Sankar on this?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Vicky, please supplementify if you would like to add anything more. I think the way I look at the question is the technical components. The technology changes very, very fast in today's world, maybe 6 months to 18 months. So to make a standardize on technology is not the right approach in my view. I would probably divide that into two parts. One is how do you process the data and how do you actually create insights who should always remain the same. But the underneath technology could be anything. Today it could be a sensor A, and in 3 months the sensor A can be replaced by a sensor B. Today it could be one network protocol, and in 6 months' time there will be another network protocol. Those things will always keep evolving. But if you keep a standard middleware, what we call as in a generic command, as an English command, so no matter where you collect the data, how you receive the data through whatever protocol, but your insights will always remain the same of how you govern the city. So the middleware is so important, which is in many cities or many places, they don't pay so much attention to it. They want to quickly jump into a smart city lamppost or an intelligent transport system. But then when the technology goes outdated, then you're stuck with the vendor who basically gave you a hardware component instead of a solution. So that's my view on this.
I agree with you, and I'm not sure if Vicky would like to add any comments on that from the data side of it.
I agree with what Sankar said, but for the standard, I think not on the technology, but probably on the data format or data components. So whatever attributes, well, I'm from the GIS aspect, so whatever attributes within the data, and also kind of keep the interoperability between the data would be the most important part to make sure the data can be used by different software, different format, different version. And yeah, that's what the standard should be.
Right. I think if I add my view also, and that's where I think many cities are working on initiative, like Singapore is also doing opendata.gov, and rather it should be a framework, like Sankar said, is not a standard around the technology, but framework towards the feature set. So if we want to solve, let's say, this particular use case, what features we would need to solve as a building block, and who will fill up those features in terms of technologies. I think there's a second part, because technology will evolve. And I think this is where I think the work which Yukata-san is also doing to create a framework rather than standard around technologies. So quick one, any comments, Yukata-san, on this?
Yes. This is basically based on the perspectives of the cities. There are a lot of domains, as I mentioned, and what's the purpose of your solution? It depends on the business model. So those things has some kind of effect for the standardization. So the standardization of API or data models is difficult, but there are some answers. The first answer is FireWare, as I mentioned. FireWare has a FireWare is trying to make a model of a city. And it has standardized the API based on the model called NGSI. It is developed by NEC Japan, and NEC is very good at the FireWare application. And it is funded by the Horizon 2020 in Europe, and many cities has many trials using FireWare as API and models. Then this is the first answer, but there are different level of answers. The second one is maturity model. To measure the maturity of smart cities, there are several ISO standards. The first one is ISO 37120. It is a very basic smart city metrics. And many cities in the world has been measured by this ISO 37120. Another standard for infrastructure is ISO 37153. It is made by Japanese companies, but some cities like Jakarta has been measured by this standard. This is the second answer, the maturity model standardization. The third answer is for the specific perspective, like CSC. CSC stands for City Service Continuity. IEC has a systems committee for CSC. And in this aspect, they have been developing standards to understand for the resilience of the city. So
Sure.
there are a lot of aspects for standardization. But the very important thing is a term is different from the meaning by the domains. Some domains uses some term, and some domains, the other domains uses the same term, different meaning. So as I mentioned, the diagram is so important, and the systems approach is based on the diagram. That's fine.
Sure. I think so. Thanks for explaining that question. So while we are kind of running by the time, I would have loved to ask more question. And I don't think we have any time left, because the next question is very, very specific to the use cases. Yutaka-san, maybe you could type the question if you like there in there itself. And while we do that, while you type the answer in the question, I would like to bring back Hui-san from GeoWorks to help us close the session for today. And for those who would like to connect with us, please connect with us. I just shared our LinkedIn profile with taking liberty sharing the profile of all the speakers. I hope you don't mind, but you might be getting a lot of LinkedIn requests maybe later. But anybody, if you want to ask any question to any of us, feel free to reach out to us. And I would like to thank one more time Shankar, Vicky, and Pakasan to staying with us for this evening, this afternoon, and evening where are you dialing from, to share some of the interesting use cases. And for the participants who are going to be attending many such sessions from the GeoWorks, I hope it will be very fruitful for you. So with that, over to you, Huisan.
Thank you, CK. So thank you, Yutaka, as well as Sankar and Vicky for your presentations. It was really very insightful for us to learn more about IoT. So for the rest of you who attended today's webinar, thank you so much for attending and for all your interesting questions. So before we go, we do have many more webinars lined up for you over the next few days. So please check out our webinars by scanning in the QR code that will be flashing on the screen, and also joining the conversation using the hashtag #SGGeoWeek. So please sign up for the events, and thank you, and we hope to see you again. Thanks everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye
Take care.
bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.